Whether you do or do not know exactly what the Geneva Conventions are, you have most likely heard of them once or twice before. You might have heard of how they lay down the basic rules of war or how various people have broken them. But there is so much more to the documents that make them so impactful to the modern age. From its ripples in shaping how humanity now engages in war to how it simply shaped the modern rights and protection of people. But what are they? And why are they so important?
The Geneva Conventions are a set of signed documents that help protect basic human rights during times of war or hardship. In 1864, Henry Dunant, a businessman that founded the idea of the International Red Cross, wrote the first draft of the document in Geneva, Switzerland, marking the birth of the Geneva Conventions. The first Geneva Convention was made to accommodate soldiers and civilians who were affected by war. Within 3 years of the initial writing, all major European powers ratified the document, agreeing to respect the writings. Since 1864, there have been 4 official conventions signed. Each new Geneva Convention has been a revise or add-on to the original text. The 4 primary signings took place in 1864, 1906, 1929, and the most important one, 1949. Since 1949, 3 additional protocols have been written. Despite not being fully noticed and acknowledged as their own conventions, they each add more to basic humanitarian laws. They each talk and revolve around a certain thing, from the rules of war, stating what a country can and cannot do to prisoners, or to simply giving help to the traumatized and injured. But they mostly collect around the similar idea of protecting human rights during times of war.
Shortly after the end of the First World War, Adolf Hitler returned to Germany an injured veteran. He and various other patriotic Germans were outraged and humiliated after the rest of the world enforced the Treaty of Versailles upon Germany in order to make a new German government. The treaty held harsh rules that were placed in order to keep Germany from rising against the world. Because of the treaty, Germany lost a majority of its land, colonies were handed to France, and the German army was forced to shrink. In the early 20s, Hitler helped forge the Nazi Party. Hitler was placed as leader of the party, and because of his ability to deliver good speeches, he began blaming the new German government, the Weimar Republic. He claimed that the Republic was weak and not keeping the Jewish and other races in check. He believed that they were trying to take over the country. As Hitler accused the Jewish civilians, the Nazi Party began to grow in power, staging a rebellion that failed miserably. He was arrested and thrown in prison. After being released a year later, he made false promises. The Nazis began dismantling the German democratic ways, and before long, he was violating the Treaty of Versailles. He was elected leader of Germany and soon after invaded Poland. And on September 1st, 1939, the Second World War began. Throughout the war, Germany committed many atrocities that broke the Geneva Conventions. They used irregular tactics during the war and often attacked medical stations. But their worst and most famous violation was the Holocaust. The Holocaust was an event that stretched nearly the entirety of the war. In simple words, the Holocaust was a genocide against European Jews. Throughout the 4-year span in which the event took place, Nazi Germany killed 6 million Jews across their occupied territories. They killed 2/3 of the Jewish population in Europe. There is very little hope in saying that the Holocaust wasn't a violation. They broke one of the single purposes of the Geneva Convention, killing unarmed and non-fighting civilians. Jewish prisoners couldn't fight back in the concentration camps. It wasn't possible. They were sent to their lengthy deaths the moment they were found, regardless of their role in the war.
December 6, 1941. Germany enacted an operation in order to invade the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin returned fire, and in forceful fashion, he successfully drove the Germans out of Russian territory and away from Moscow. Joseph Stalin, the premier of the Soviet Union during World War II, helped lead the Soviet Union to what was considered its golden age. He helped boost the economy and boost safety inside the country, but not without negative effects. Joseph Stalin enforced strict rules that heavily controlled the Russian population. The gulags began being used more often. Criminals against the Soviet Union were sent to these camps, where they were treated like utter scum. Life conditions were inhumane and hard. Forced labor was the daily schedule for the average gulag prisoner. During World War II, the gulag system reached its peak, with hundreds of German soldiers being sent to the labor camps and worked to death. In these camps is where soldiers were practically met with the worst fate than death. They worked in below freezing temperatures, where a majority of them died in the process. The Soviets' violations came along from them not simply aiding the soldiers as prisoners. The life expectancy of the gulags were slim to none, with most men dying to the harsh and barbaric conditions. The Soviet Union, despite not signing the Geneva Convention, often followed a majority of its rules. But when it came to the gulags, it was as if the Geneva Convention didn't even exist. Between the Holocaust and the gulags, the two have many different causes and purposes, but the one thing that the two have in common is their permanent mark on humanity. The Holocaust killed well over 6 million Jewish people and more or less 5 million non-Jewish people. The gulags, however, killed over 1.7 million people throughout its lifespan. To compare these numbers is nothing more than a horror show. Despite the gulag's horrible living conditions and strict ways, very little things can come close to the Holocaust, the gulags included. The Holocaust, however, impacted the world like no other. But if we just look at the statistical view from both events, the Holocaust defeats the Gulag 10 times out of 10. Throughout the Geneva Convention's existence, there have been countless attempts at making it perfect. But no matter how hard humanity tries to protect the unprotected during war, something will always be there to harm them. Adolf Hitler and the concentration camps attacked the Jews despite Germany signing the 1929 Geneva Convention. They broke their responsibilities by murdering mass amounts of unarmed civilians. Joseph Stalin removed individual rights from a majority of his people during World War II. His gulags were a prison that would ruin a man and leave him broken if he was lucky enough to come out. Both of these leaders respectively broke humanitarian laws by harming people who couldn't fight back.